All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Athens for Everyone's event, Candidates Discuss. This is I think the fifth one we're doing. Wow, we've been doing this for a while, and we're going to keep doing them up until the election in November. We have our guest panel of these wonderful progressive candidates, and today we are going to be talking about criminal justice reform, particularly from the aspect of money and how money plays into our criminal justice system. And before we get into it, and I'm going to ask the panelists their top 3 reforms that they would like to see to our criminal justice system to get us started. But before we do that, we should do some introductions. So if we could please start off with Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Dean Winfield. I'm running for the US Senate in the special election with 20 other candidates. I'm the one who's standing up for a job guarantee social rights agenda that I think we need now more than ever to remove all the obstacles to our opportunity and really unshackle our democracy. I've been teaching at UGA since '82. I'm a member of the Communication Workers of America organizing Local 3265 that's attempting to unionize all employees in our state university system. I'm married to Sujata Winfield, who is an immigration attorney who hails from India. We have 3 children who went to the public schools in Athens. I ran for the US House of Representatives in the 10th District 2 years ago, but I'm back again. And I hope you'll all see what I stand for at length on my campaign website, winfieldforsenate.com. Thanks.
Awesome. Let's see from here, John Q.
All right, I'm John Q. Williams. I'm the Democratic nominee for sheriff in Clark County, mostly covering Athens, Georgia, and some pieces of some other cities around. I've been in Athens most of the last 20 to 22 years, just depending on how you do the math. And I've always loved it. Much like Dr. Winfield there, both of my sons went entirely through the Clark County public school system. And I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of them. I'm running for sheriff because I do believe in criminal justice reform, and that's part of the reason I got into law enforcement to begin with over 20 years ago as a dispatcher. I wanted to see some changes. There were some questions I had, and I think I've helped some of those changes. I want to continue being a voice and a conduit for those changes that need to be made in order to have everybody treated with dignity and respect going forward. In a nutshell, that's me. There's more to it, so stay tuned.
Nice, thank you. Jonathan Wallace.
Hey everybody, I'm Jonathan Wallace. I'm the candidate for Georgia House District 119. That's the southeastern portion of Athens, Clark County, and the majority of Oconee County. I have served in this role from 2017 to 2019, and looking to go back here. There's a lot of things we want to address. There's expanding Medicaid, there's fully funding our schools, there's criminal justice reform. The thing that I think is still on a lot of folks' mind is the deficient response to the pandemic. There's voter suppression. I know we're going to be talking about criminal justice reform, but those are a little bit of the things that inspire me to put myself out there and seek to serve the people in 119 again.
Awesome, thank you. So succinct. Mokah, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. My name is Mokah Jasmine Johnson. I'm an educator, activist, entrepreneur. I'm a grandma of 9 glam babies, beautiful glam babies. And I'm running for Georgia State House District 117. That covers a portion of Jackson, Athens, Clark County, Barrow, and Oconee. My platform, if you check out my website, Mokah for Georgia, MOKAH for Georgia.com. I'm advocating the top 3 issues is justice, equity, and education. So fighting for the future of our children, working class family, and to dismantle unjustifiably incarcerating people, Black and brown people. across the board, and just seeking ways to create an equitable system so that everybody in the state of Georgia, or within my district, I should say, that's big in the state of Georgia, but within my district can have access to healthcare and a quality of life. So that's it for me.
I did the thing. Zach, you want to go?
Yeah, we're all guilty of that one. My name is Zachary Perry. I am a law student here at UGA Law and a bartender in town. I am running for Georgia State Senate District 46 as the Democratic nominee. I'm running because I think it's time that our representatives in the General Assembly, especially the representatives of Athens and my district, start actually representing the interest of people. A lot of the changes that need to be made, I feel, are obvious changes, and criminal justice reform is a perfect example of that. We'll get into the specifics of that later, but I think there are a lot of things that, very little things that the state legislature could do that could improve the lives of a lot of Georgians and help the working class and the working poor also join in the benefits of, a 7-year best for business state economy. So.
Awesome. And Deborah Gonzalez.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Deborah Gonzalez, and I am currently running for district attorney in the Western Judicial Circuit, which includes Athens and Oconee. Many of you are familiar with me because I served as your state House representative for House District 117, which I am so proud to see Mokah running for, and she's going to win because we're going to flip those 2 seats again as we need to. So a couple things since the last time we all met. I've been endorsed, as well as Jonathan and Mokah, by Stacey Abrams, and I believe Zachary Perry was as well. So we're really excited about getting that endorsement because Stacey's a hero for us. And today I was named as one of the 50 most influential Latinos in the state of Georgia. This is the second time I've received that, and so I'm very proud. So just wanted to share a couple of good news before we get into all the dire things about money and the criminal legal system as we go through. So thanks for giving me a chance.
Thank you for some happy news before we get into the deep dark. All right, so starting us off today, we're going to ask each candidate for their top 3 reforms that they would like to see. Now, ideally, it would be great to hear what kind of reform they would like to see specifically from the office that they're running for. But if there are bigger priorities to them that they want to mention that would be coming from a different office than the one that they're vying for, that's fine too. So who's gonna go first? Let's see. Zach, you want to start us off?
It's my turn to do the thing. Happy to start. So just to run quickly through, top 3. In cash bail, effective, and it unfairly targets low-income communities. In the death penalty, it's a barbaric punishment and has, debatable results, and 1 out of every 10 people on death row are found to later be innocent. And the third is a bigger one, kind of broader, but can reform our parole and probation system around rehabilitation and reentry into society, as opposed to this never-ending bills and repunishment and recidivism, and just keeping these people stuck in a permanent underclass. So that's 3.
That was thorough. Thank you. Let's see. Richard, you want to go?
Sure. I want to propose on a national level that, first of all, we ensure that everyone has quality representation in both civil and criminal cases, irrespective of how much money they have, and that can be secured by having a legal care for all program on the model of Medicare for all. It will cover all personal expenses of civil and legal counsel with no copays, no deductibles, and no premiums, and funded by a progressive tax system. Secondly, I want us to prohibit nationally all for-profit businesses that are infecting our justice system, such as for-profit prisons, including for-profit prisons for immigration detention centers, and all for-profit, well, if there are any parole, but also probation services. And thirdly, I want us to end all of the cash payments that are, or cash expenses that are levied on people as they go through our toll road legal system, starting with cash bail and including all the fees you have as you go through courts, adjudications, through jail and prison, and when you get out, having to deal with the fees of parole and probation services. I'd like to see all of those eliminated because they end up basically not only preying upon the poor, but impoverishing them further.
Awesome. Thank you. Mokah, you want to go?
Oh, sure, definitely. Well, I would say there's a lot of things that I've voted for on a local level that I would continue to fight for on a state level. So for example, in Athens, Clarke County, we have a local cash bail ordinance that that allows people to get out of jail on their own recognizance for low misdemeanor minor offenses, but it only covers the local ordinance. So I would advocate for it to end cash bail, because across the US, there's 76% of people held in local jails that have not been convicted of any crime. In Georgia, 50% are awaiting trial and they have not been convicted of a crime, but yet they are stuck in jail, which means it turns into a possibility of them losing their job, their housing, and many other things that rolls into that. Another one of my top issues that I would like to advocate for is to address police brutality, also to raise the age when it comes to sentencing. In Georgia, someone can be sentenced if they're 17 years old. They can end up spending a long time in jail at that young age, 17 and a half years old. And I would say third, it's so difficult because there's a lot of things that I want to address, but I would say legalize marijuana. We have a lot of different issues that's going on in Georgia that needs to be addressed in order for us to have a better justice system. But in cash bail, number one, raise the age requirement and to legalize marijuana.
Solid goals. Thank you. Let's see. Jonathan Wallace.
Thanks. Yeah, I will just highlight real quick before I go into my top three that both Mokah's and my predecessors, the soon-to-be ex-representatives for House Districts 117 and 119, both supported a bill that would, and actually co-sponsored a bill that would have outlawed being let go on your own recognizance. So they would have essentially overturned the work that was done here in Athens, Clarke County. They would have remove the local control that oftentimes they say they claim to support. So definitely, I'm in the same boat. I think making sure that we protect the rights of our local community to end cash bail. I think that would be great for us to expand that beyond just the local ordinances and see that statewide as well, because as Mokah said, I think it was 2015, we had 73%. I found some stats in Athens, Clarke County that we had 73% of the people who were within jail in Athens, Clarke County were there because they were not able to be released on their own recognizance. They were not able to afford the bail fee. So that's an expensive proposition. And so I'm right there with that. It is tough to choose the top three. The other two I think that I would go with would be a bill that was sponsored by Representative Renita Shannon, which is a use of force bill. So tracking what the use of force is by our police officers. I think sunlight's the best disinfectant. So being able to see how our police forces are using the extensive powers that we give them would be something that would help address some of those inequities that we have seen show up in the news media. And then the other one is something about a bill around ending racial profiling. So how are we ensuring that, let's have the Attorney General produce a bill that ensures, how many times law enforcement agencies are stopping folks, searching them, or collecting data on individuals. And I think that would be important as well. We know that there can be an issue with over-policing and how crime increases when police are focused in an area. So having, again, sunlight on those issues, I think would help us determine where those powers are being used responsibly and where they may be being used inappropriately.
Wonderful, thank you. And now I'm gonna switch it, Deborah, and then we'll have John at the very end. All the pressure, John.
Well, ditto, 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 yes, 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 yes to everybody's list. I will make mine a little bit more specific, though, to the district attorney's office and what I would like. And again, it's really hard to just say 3 priorities, right? Because there is so much that needs to be done. But at the core of all of this is to make our families and our communities safer. And I think that's the key to all of these reforms, right? Is that is the ultimate goal that we have here. The first reform I want to look at actually deals with the culture in the DA's office and to eliminate as much as possible the over prosecution of individuals. And this is the stacking of crimes on top of an individual where either the office cannot prove a particular crime and they want the person to go in and serve a sentence for something, or it's part of the plea deal type of process that happens. I think I mentioned last week that in Athens, 97% of our cases do not go to a trial. And so the DAs actually have a lot of leverage when it comes to those plea deal negotiations. And so making sure that those are a lot more fair and just than what we have right now. The other thing deals with our juvenile justice system and implementing restorative justice programs, just the same way that they have various places around our country. The DC circuit, for example, their entire juvenile justice system is based on restorative justice. And so there are resources that we can bring that will eliminate some of those sort of hooks that get the kids into this school to prison pipeline by working on that and working with the community. The other thing is bringing more accountability, more transparency, and more resources to what's happening in the DA's office. For too long, the DA's office has been sort of this black box. Nobody knows how those decisions are made. Why are people charged with one thing and not the other? On their budgets, if you go back about 4 to 5 years, they keep promising a public portal of information so that we can know what's happening in that DA's office. That has never been implemented, even though they keep putting it as a line item into that budget. So that is something definitely make sure we get an audit in that office so that we know what is happening. And the last thing I just want to throw in, because we are campaigning, right? But there has been a movement started in California by some of the more progressive prosecutors to have adopted by their state bars a rule that will prohibit DA candidates from accepting contributions from bail bondsmen and police unions to not fall into a conflict of interest. And that is something that I would like to present to our DA association here in Georgia, because I think that is a question that keeps coming up, is how can DAs then prosecute when police officers engage in violence or excessive use of force when they're actually receiving money from these unions? Or how do they eliminate cash bail if they're receiving money from a bail company? And so I just thought that was really important to put forward, and I look forward to pursuing that here in Georgia.
Awesome. All right, John Q.
Right. So thank you. And I think not more than anybody else, but definitely my office, when elected, has a direct effect on criminal justice and from the reform aspects. So I think that almost anything I do is going to speak to that. I think where we have to start is with the fact that you have to treat people with dignity and respect. So it'll sound a little bit self-serving, but the first thing I want to do is fix things in the sheriff's office right now. We need to fix how our employees, how our deputies, how civilian staff are all treated, and give them a voice and raise the morale there. That's going to empower them, and in the future, it's also going to lead them to be more willing and more accepting towards treating even inmates, outside partners, other agencies with more dignity and respect, because they'll have it within themselves. So changing the culture is at the top of my list in order to just get to treating people correctly. So that's number one. Next on the list, and I got to try to kind of put some of these in the same box that might not always seem like they are, but we want to stop recidivism, because people are going to go to jail. People are going to commit crimes. That's going to happen. But when they're there, we should be giving them some opportunities to not just come back again and again. So we want to increase the GED programs. We want to have people there to help with that. Let's look at the possibility of adding learning trades while they're in the jail system. We want mental health advocates and mental health treatment to be available. All these things are things that are going to speak towards having people come back less through that revolving door, and empower them when they get out, because they'll be ready to have a job when they get out. They'll have a set of skills. They'll have mental health services if that's why they're there going forward. So they're less likely to come back. So that's the second. Lastly, this goes back to treating people with dignity and respect, but a big problem for people when they're in jail is just not having a support system. Sometimes that support system itself is broken, but without that support system, parents, siblings, friends, people seem to kind of be doomed to repeat that cycle. So let's have them have better access to those resources while they're there. So we need to fix again, somebody said it already, the privatized part of it, the phone contact. That it shouldn't cost you that much, or your loved ones that much, to get in contact with you. If we really want to rehabilitate people, that's got to be a piece of it. We got to fix the system of visitation, so people can have more contact with their family members, their kids, to see that bright light to say, hey, this is what I need to get out and get my life on track for. I think that's only going to help people. And then the commissary items, I've seen the prices. I've heard the restrictions on, how many, the whites that you can bring when you check in, and the window that you have before you have to buy them for the commissary. And I think we don't want outside companies profiting off of our jail system. But if there's going to be any profit, why can't it be inside? So why don't we have these things available? I go to Sam's Club right now and buy things in bulk, and I could sell, let's say, a pack of any kind of candy. Let's say I like sour candies. If I got a pack of sour candy, I can buy like 48 of them for $10, and then I can sell them each for 50 cents, and I make $50. We can do that at that level too, without just price gouging people. So maybe not candy in particular, but that's just the type of thinking that I'm willing to do, and try to cut down those costs and get people from making money off of our inmates and at the jail. 1, 2, and 3.
Oof, nice. These are all awesome goals and lists, and this is exactly why we need people like y'all in office. So to those watching, please vote. So from here, we get into the discussion part about money and how that affects our criminal justice system. And many of you just pointed out some of the things that need reform are very much connected to the money involved in our criminal justice system. So is there anyone who wants to go first on this?
I just wanted to add one other important matter that none of us brought up. Of course, to be limited to 3 makes it hard to cover all the things that need to be considered, but one huge matter that affects, I think both jails and prisons throughout the country, is that prisoners are used basically to carry out what could be considered slave labor. In fact, it's sort of treated as such in our 13th Amendment. Namely, they're sent out to do all sorts of work. And often it involves doing much of the work that should be done by, let's say, public employees in a municipality. And they do it basically, either they're paid nothing, which often is the case, or they're paid very little, much less than a minimum wage. So I think that is completely unfair. I think, in a sense, one could say that all those people who are alive who have been victims of this kind of slave labor deserve reparations. They deserve compensation for all the wages they have not received. But I think also if anyone in prison is going to be doing any kind of work, they should be paid a fair wage. And I think we need not just the current $7.25 minimum wage. I think we need a fair wage starting at $20 an hour and adjusted upwards to keep pace with inflation and growth of wealth in our nation as a whole. But I think this is an important thing, and we see it in Athens, as we all know. A tremendous amount of the work being done around the town is being done by people from jails and prison who are not being paid at all, or certainly not being paid properly.
Very true. Yeah. Deborah?
Yeah, so I just wanted to start our conversation with a little bit of context. And a lot of what I'm going to be presenting right now is from the Georgia Justice Reform Project. And this is a partnership of over 100 organizations, nonprofit, most of them throughout the state of Georgia. And they did a series of Talk Justice Tuesdays before COVID hit. And one of them was called Follow the Money. And so I'd just like to share with you a little bit, again, to put this in context, because when we're talking about the money on the country level, it's costing us right now $80.7 billion. And these are just for public corrections agencies, okay? Again, 80.7 billion. Now, I say that because then I want to tell you what it is for Georgia. For Georgia right now, we are spending on state prisons over 628,169. That is a large, huge amount of money, but that's just the prison system. That doesn't include food, right? The food and farm operations right now are coming out to 27,625,000. This is in Georgia. For the administration of all of our criminal system is now coming out to 37,627,000. For offender management, it's costing us 43,463,000. And for detention centers that are not considered state prisons, so local jails and things of that nature, 48,448,000. Private prisons are costing Georgians, private prisons, not the public ones, but private ones are costing us taxpayers over $139 million, okay, for a private entity. And health costs are costing us $250,432,000. These are just the costs in Georgia. This is what Georgia taxpayers are paying when it comes to this. This is an expensive system. And what's even more so, it is an ineffective system. It is not making our communities any safer by just putting these people out of sight and out of mind. And so I think we really have to look, that amount of money, somebody gets that money, right? Somebody is going to be paid that money. And those are all, for the most part, private entities. And so when we talk about the money in the system, what we have to understand is that there is a true business interest to keep some of these systems working the way they are. We talked about the commissary, okay? We talked about phone calls, a 15-minute phone call, how much it costs. It costs, up to $20 for a family member to put $60 on an inmate's card for him to use on his commissary. They get this sort of iPad kind of mechanism. It will cost them, for a 30-minute video visitation with their family, $3.95. To send a little video out is $1. These phone calls, it costs money to put money on a card. Yes, it does. think about that. I think to put in $25, you have to pay 10. The next one is to put, $60, you pay 25. So if you envision how much is going out, and the other thing is that when we look at the commissaries, what they actually have there is not nutritious. It doesn't suffice for the inmates to be able to feel full. I mean, they're left hungry if you see some of these meals that they are receiving. And so they try to supplement with what's in the commissary, and they can't, because it's costing them way too much money, and it is not being nutritious at all. And so I bring these things for us to understand that, one, there is a business incentive. There's a motivation of these private companies to make money through this system. There's an economic development motivation for many of our rural counties who look at this as a place to have jobs for their people and a place to get free labor for infrastructure within their counties. We have the census coming up, right? Everybody's doing the census, and right now they are counting those inmates as residents of that particular county. And as Jonathan Wallace mentioned last week, if it's $3,000 or $3,200 per person who's counted in that census for that county, think of how many thousands, hundreds of people that they have in those prisons that are counting, that will bring that money into that county. So I just wanted to bring that up as some of the sort of context and things that people are talking about when they talk about money in the system. It's not just one little thing of court fees. There are lots of places where the money comes, where the money gets added on. For example, on some of the fees that people pay when they get out, part of it goes into a retirement fund or a benevolent fund for the police officers. You question, why is it that has to come out of there, right? So let's also look at where that money's coming from and then how it goes out. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that you summed it up well when you said expensive and ineffective. Like, it would be one thing if we're spending this money and, oh my gosh, fewer people are going to jail, and our prisons are actually helping people like get back into regular life. I think Zach wanted to go next.
Yeah, I just want to add on to the context conversation. Deborah mentioned that one of the seminars was titled "Follow the Money," and I think it's really important to do that whenever you're talking about who's profiting off of these systems. One is we have a problem where bail systems and court fee systems are actually funding or being a significant source of funding for local municipal courts and even just municipal governments. So, you're paying for your infrastructure by profiting off of crime. Another really important place to follow the money is it ends up in the hands of politicians. So Jonathan mentioned that his opponent and Mokah's opponent both supported bills in the House that would have mandated cash bail. In 2018, immediately after Athens passed its ordinance, which would have limited cash bail locally, my opponent, who represents part of Athens and knew this was a thing, countered that with a bill that in the Senate, he wrote the bill in the Senate that would have mandated cash bail and taken away discretion from judges. Now, if you listen to what Deborah mentioned about a movement to prohibit and not accept money from bail bonds companies, that's something that should be done across the spectrum, because one of the most consistent and generous donors to my opponent are bail bonds companies. And I imagine if you looked at Jonathan's opponents, Deborah's opponent, John's opponent, Mokah's opponent, and a couple of Richard's opponents, that's going to be consistent across the board. They also probably take money from private prison corporations, criminal defense firms, and different just entities that are profiting off of this criminal justice system that isn't ineffective, that is extremely expensive, and doesn't keep our communities safer. So whenever we go through criminal justice reform proposals, a lot of these things we present as very obvious. I talk about cash bail a lot because it's not the most effective way to ensure that someone shows up to their court date. There are way more effective ways. Giving someone a ride, sending them a text the day before, it's like, hey, you got court tomorrow. Those things are more effective than making somebody go take out $10,000 loans and then pay interest on those loans just so they can go work their job while they await their first day in court. There's a lot more effective ways to do that. So these seem obvious. The reason these obvious measures haven't been taken is because the people in charge are taking money from the people who are profiting over the existing systems. And that's the only reason. There's no legitimate argument for most of these proposals. And most of these proposals are very much common sense, backed up by evidence, backed up by examples, and we know they work. So if your representative in the General Assembly is taking money from somebody to do something that doesn't work, even if you don't agree with me politically on everything, you should at least agree that that's not okay.
Yeah, Zach, you took it in the exact direction that I was going to go in, which is when I served in the State House, one of the things that the governor was lauded for, Governor Deal at the time, was his criminal justice reform, his pre-diversion program. And the reason that he was lauded for it across the aisle, and these bills and this work was lauded universally, is because it was a financially sound decision, and it was also the humane decision. And you're exactly right. We are seeing bail bonds funds going towards folks. So, my commitment to the folks that I'm serving in 119 and that I will serve as their representative soon is that when we're evaluating these things, it's about things that are going to make it better for all. So when we employ the pre-trial diversion program, we're saving tons of money that we can then reinvest in other programs, maybe fully funding our schools, for example, or funding other criminal justice reforms that can save us even more money. So looking at the efficacy of the bills that we pass is something that's super important to me as a person. And it just makes sense that it's expensive to stick somebody in a jail cell or in a prison cell and pay for them to live there, especially if there's other opportunities for us to avoid that in more effective ways. And you literally took the words right out of my mouth with respect to the bail reform. A text is the most magical thing to remind people to keep their appointments, including if it's a court date. And this is for folks who are listening at home, this is not conjecture. Like, this has been done in other places. We know this works. And we are going to see a very large budgetary challenge in the next cycle in the State House. And it's going to be critical that we are frugal with our funds, and good stewards of the funds that we receive as legislators, that we then turn around and determine how to spend on behalf of the people. So I can't say enough about how important it is that you look at what your representatives are doing and you recognize when they're not working for the benefit of the people, when they're not working for the benefit of our communities. And those folks, they have to go.
Could I?
I would like to
Hey, Sean.
follow
Oh,
up
sorry,
behind
go ahead.
Jonathan real quick, if possible. So even with Deborah and Jonathan and the numbers that they pointed out, when we stop locking people up on unnecessary crimes, we can actually save taxpayers millions and millions of dollars. And we can shift some of that investment into rehabilitative programs, community training and policing, mental health interventions. From me being on the ground level for the past 4 years, working on the ground level, seeing people go in and out of jail, serving on the pre-arrest diversion program task force. I'm currently on the police advisory task force team where we're trying to create a civilian oversight board. People will show up to court. Typically, they don't want to continue to go in and out of jail, but the justice system is imbalanced and it's unfair. For example, part of my morning today, we were spending time trying to bail a young man out of jail. He's approximately about 21 years old. So he's been sitting in jail since March because he does not have money or anyone in his family that could bond him out. And what I have noticed is that there was another case that happened recently downtown, within downtown Athens, where there was a business owner that owned a bar, has been accused of raping and holding a young lady against her will. So because he was able to get bond and he's able to afford to pay for that bond, he's out of jail. He's at home with an arrest, with an anklet on his leg. He's able to sit at home because he can afford it. The young man, his charges doesn't have anything to do with causing any type of bodily harm to a person. It's dealing with around of some type of vehicle situation, whether it's theft of a vehicle or bad tag or whatever the case may be. And he's been sitting in jail since March because he doesn't have enough money or have family members that can post that bond to let him out of jail. So when someone is sitting in jail and they're stuck there because of financial reason, that is not a conviction of innocence or guilt. If you're a murderer, a rapist, the courts, for whatever reason, decide to post or to give you a bond, you can actually get out of jail and be roaming within society or on house arrest or however they want to do it. And there's people that's locked up in the system that has caused less offensive crimes, misdemeanor, low-level offense crimes that's locked up and cannot get out because they don't have enough money to bond them out of jail. So that is a big issue for me because I'm on ground level trying to work and trying to help people to restore justice, to give people a second chance. And what I'm seeing on a state level is like they're cutting budgets in the criminal justice reform area where we're losing our accountability court, which was also implemented by Judge Sweat. He was one of our judges here in Athens, Clarke County. And they're just reversing so many things instead of trying to create a way to where people can where we can restore justice. So we're not implementing restorative justice practices. We're locking people up unnecessarily. We're actually causing people more money instead of saving them money. And it's a system that is broken and it seriously needs to be fixed.
I wanted to
So I
add,
just want to chime in and share that with y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Mokah.
I
Yeah.
sort of wanted to add another factor that I think is very important in the way in which our whole justice system is something that has a monetary incentive to incarcerate as many people as possible, and in particular to incarcerate poor people, to make them poorer. And there's another side to it that is crucial to what allows this to happen. And it's not only that all of the moneyed interests, both public and private, that are feeding on this toll road justice system, it's also that we disenfranchise prisoners. We disenfranchise them when they're in prison. We keep them disenfranchised when they're out of prison, particularly if they're not only poor, but they have fees that they can't pay. And we've seen this happening right now in Florida, with Republican legislators doing everything they can to keep the vote away from people who have previously been in prison. What that means is that people in prison who are disproportionately poor, disproportionately people of color, are being deprived of the opportunity to have their fair political influence and say. And it has another aspect that affects how the whole justice system is tilted against them. Because in our country, as we all know, jurors are selected from voter rolls. And of course, this played itself out in a particularly unjust way during Jim Crow, where African Americans were totally disenfranchised. That meant that they were completely kept off of juries, which meant they were dealing with a justice system in which African Americans had no representation on juries, let alone in government. And the same thing is happening now, because our mass incarceration, which is disenfranchising a disproportionate number of poor people and people of color, is also keeping them underrepresented on the juries that are determining their fate as they go through the justice system. And that means that those who are sucked into it because of their poverty, because of the disproportionate poverty affecting people of color, now find themselves facing a justice system that is tilted against them.
I would also like to chime in after Richard, just to put this out there so people can understand some of the programs that are already out there. So there is what they call the pre-arrest diversion program. I was also on the task force for that, and the whole goal for that particular program is to prevent you from actually getting into the justice system. So if you qualify for the pre-arrest diversion program, if an officer pulls you over and he gives you this ticket, that person might have an option to where they say, okay, we'll check out the pre-arrest diversion program. So it would give them an opportunity from not having to a fingerprintable charge, a record, or actually physically going into the system where you see, this person was arrested for whatever the case may be, low misdemeanor, nonviolent offenses. You won't see that come up on their record. They'll have an opportunity to go through this particular program in order to not stack up any charges. So basically, or to not have a record and for charges and arrest reports to stack up against them. This affects their ways of living when they're trying to get jobs and in multiple ways. So in addition to the pre-arrest diversion program, we need to continuously seek ways, not just on a local level, because this is just a local ordinance, and we have to look for more programs that will help people from going into the system and getting that fingerprintable charges. So that is something that I feel like that, as a representative or anyone that's in a powerful position, they should definitely be seeking ways to restore our system as opposed to incarcerating people, because they're actually causing more expenses and finances for the taxpayers, because you're having to pay for everybody that is in those beds that's in the jail. There is a price tag to every bed inside that jail, and the taxpayers are paying for that.
Yeah, thank you, Mokah. I think John Q had something to say, and then Deborah.
Yeah, I just wanted to really chime in. First of all, I just want to say it's always great to have these discussions, and I find myself kind of falling back and just soaking in some of this information. I'm really listening to you guys, and I'm really, getting some different perspectives on this. Coming from a law enforcement perspective, some people would be surprised to know that, hey, I fully support the pretrial programs, also the pre-arrest. I think that's a brilliant idea that has come up, and I would really, really like to hear more ideas going forward. A lot of times people want to show that and say that the sheriff does not have a lot of power to change a lot of these things. But as sheriff, I intend to use my voice to get behind and support a lot of these issues, like the cash bail system, things of that nature. Again, I was adamant and still to this day have not taken any money that I'm aware of. Maybe somebody slipped something in the bag somewhere, but any knowledgeable donations from anybody that's a bail bondsman or something of that nature, I have not accepted and will not accept, just because even if it would not sway me, just the fact that it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck, I might think it's a duck, and I won't want anybody else thinking that I'm a duck when I'm, but I am. I'm John Q. Going forward, I think a lot of these programs are important that we do that, and it involves being an actual good steward of the county's money. Again, we remember that the local jails are run locally. They don't get the state money. These are taxpayers' money that it's coming from. And again, as I don't know if it was, maybe it was Mokah that said that a lot of these folks have not been convicted of anything, or if it is, it's a misdemeanor. We have to really focus on that and not penalize people to the point that they cannot recover for it. So that's why I want all these other programs to try to get people to keep what they have, that 10% of dignity that you don't want to lose, or whatever it is. You don't want that thrown out the window. And that's what comes from being in, we say criminal justice, but let's just call it what it is. America itself is built on this monetary system that you can't get out of. And yes, it's definitely evident in criminal justice, but when you're hampered by the criminal justice system and you can't get out, you can't get to work, you can't make that money, it's so much on a more, huge stage than just what affects you in law enforcement. It affects your family, your job, your education, everything. So I just want to put that out there, and I'm looking forward to working with a lot of you folks And hopefully we can do some things locally that do reflect nationally. And people say, hey, look at Athens, Clarke County, how they're doing stuff. That's what we need to be doing. That's my goal.
That's awesome. We appreciate that about you, John. Deborah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add in some information to what Mokah very briefly touched on, the accountability courts. You know, Georgia was actually at the forefront of this kind of idea of having some sort of diversion program, diverting them from incarceration and going through these programs. Athens itself is pretty fortunate. We have 6 of these accountability courts right now, and they do things like treatment courts, which help with mental illness, drug felony courts, even a parental court to help parents who may have gotten behind on their payments, their child support payments, for example, but trying to keep the family together. Another court deals with that, and we have a veterans court. And so we're very fortunate in that sense. But I also want to make sure that people understand that those accountability courts are championed by the judges here in Athens and Oconee. There is what's called the Council of Accountability Court Judges of Georgia. This was created in 2015. So you might think, you know, it's still relatively early what we're dealing with the accountability courts, but I do want to make it clear that this is championed by our judges. And Mokah mentioned Judge Sweat, but there are so many others who are working on this. How does the DA office fit with the accountability courts? Well, the DA office is one of the gatekeepers. And right now we have a DA office that has really restricted access to these accountability courts. In other words, they have the authority to tell somebody, no, you cannot go in there. Now, this is a financial matter, right? And let me tell you why. According to their own survey of the Council of Accountability Court Judges, in 2017, when these were still on the lower end, just 2 years in, the state of Georgia actually received $38.2 million in benefits by diverting individuals into these accountability courts. On average, we save over $5,000 for every individual that goes through an accountability court instead of putting them in incarceration. Now, it actually adds up, right? Georgia is the #1 state in terms of community supervision. Right now, that community supervision, which we may call probation, there is a fee for that, okay? And that can get very expensive. And if they can go into accountability programs, which are considered a part of that community supervision as well, but it still lessens the cost. And I think that's really important, because when we say that we can save $5,000 a person, we actually save more, because what we pay as a state is less than $10,000 because we can get federal funds for that. And so that's something to keep in mind about those accountability courts. Are they perfect? No. Their fees are kind of high for some people, and so some people can't even afford to get into the accountability courts. It's something that there is an accountability court steering task force that I have been a part of and have met with the judges and a whole bunch of people who are part of this task force looking at this. And one of the things that they are working on is a fund through the Athens Community Foundation to help with some of the expenses of these accountability courts, to make it more accessible to individuals. But we still have to work on that part from the DA's office into loosening that restriction that they're doing right now and allowing more people to be in there than where they were before. So I just wanted to share that about the accountability courts as we talk about money, because sometimes people say, well, they get a fee for that. They have to pay a fee, but then there's also the benefit that the individual gets. And the other thing that I want to point out, when Mokah mentioned the pre-trial, the pre-arrest diversion, how important is that? Well, a lot of people don't understand that there are actually 2 kinds of records that an individual will get. You can have an arrest record, and then you can have the actual conviction record. or the sentence record. And just because you get into like an accountability court program that says, okay, if you finish this, you won't have that conviction record, you still may have that arrest record unless it is requested to be eliminated as well. So there are lots of people, those mug shots that come out, right? And individuals, you know, if somebody's doing a social media check on an individual for a job and those mug shots come out, that's the way that they're getting it from the arrest records that are considered public information. Thank you.
I want to.
Zach, do you mind if I go real quick? I'm actually going to have to head out soon, and I just wanted to tag on there just a tiny bit to put some more numbers. So Deborah, thank you for that. That's fantastic for folks to understand how expensive it is to run these systems so poorly. And so we've talked about, Zach had mentioned earlier how the donations to our some of our elected officials help facilitate these types of ineffective, inefficient, expensive policies that impact both the bottom line of Georgia, but also, as Deborah alluded to, impacts those people's ability to earn income later on because of the stigma of them having gone through the court process. So the thing that you have to realize is the governor's budget, he proposed a $2.5 million increase to fund private prisons. He proposed a 1.6 million cut to the GED testing and vocational certification programs. So if you're curious as to why these terrible things could happen, I just wanted to throw those two numbers out so you understood how, as Deborah loves to say, how our budgets reflect our values. And what we're seeing from the current slate of folks in elected office in Georgia is that their budgets reflect the values of the people who are donating funds to their races. So Zach, I've got to run. I had something come up that I have to attend to. And so I appreciate the time, y'all, and see you at the next one in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. We appreciate having you.
Hi, Jonathan. Yeah, I want to pick up where Deborah mentioned state supervision. And Deborah mentioned that we're the #1 state for state supervision in the country. And what she means by that is that we have the most people under state supervision of any state in the entire country, not just by proportion of population, but by sheer numbers. So we have more people under probation and parole than California, than Texas, than Florida, than New York, Ohio, any of these states that have more population than us. We still have more people proportionally and by numbers. And that system is, bringing it back to people, there are private interests involved in that system. Athens is lucky enough to have a public probation system where the late chief Dale Allen was really reform-minded and really invested in looking into new ways to look at criminal justice reform. And I really hope that program and that system, that office continues that reform pursuit because it's important. And people shouldn't be profiting off of probation. They shouldn't be profiting off any aspect of criminal justice reform, but you shouldn't have an incentive to overcharge somebody or hold someone more accountable just because if you have someone who fails to make their probation fees, you can extend their probation. And so businesses are given an incentive to make those fees difficult to meet or give rules difficult to meet. So they have someone stuck on, stuck paying rent basically in perpetuity. And so that's a very strong reason why you shouldn't have private businesses in probation. But our probation system also is extremely ineffective in a lot of ways. It doesn't really make it easier for people to re-enter into society. It oftentimes doesn't really address the problem. It's just, hey, you can't get caught doing something bad for 2 years and you have to pay a lot of money in the meantime. And one thing we need to be careful though is not just reforming probation, but looking at probation. We have to avoid looking at probation as a perfect alternative to incarceration. So one reason we have such a large probation system is we have worked in the past 10 years as a result of Nathan Deal's criminal justice reform to reduce the amount of people going into prisons. So in Georgia, we're finally getting to the point where more people are coming out of prison than going in. And the problem is that a lot of that numbers hasn't been shifted from, reduced arrest or anything. It's just we're putting them in probation or in these diversion programs or drug courts instead. And there's like a lot of things are great. You know, the pretrial diversion programs, veterans courts, family courts, they're amazing. Anyone who hasn't gone to one of them, the graduation ceremonies are open to the public. I don't know how they're doing them with Zoom and stuff, but if you have the opportunity, go check one out. They're wonderful. But we need to refocus our efforts to actually putting people back into society, getting them safe housing, getting them, Dale Allen, the late chief, mentioned a warm handoff of, so John Q, if someone had mental health issues at the jail and he was overseeing a mental health program to get them back on their feet. And then once they're released, John would then make sure that they got in touch with the probation office and Advantage Behavioral so that treatment continues. And that needs to be facilitated by a state legislature and a state system that makes sure that it's happening across the state. So if you get arrested in Clark County, but you live in Walton County, that warm handoff occurs between counties. So this is why we all need to work together to make sure these things happen. And we need to focus on actually improving the lives of people who unfortunately get caught up in the criminal justice system.
I just wanted to add very quickly, first of all, I can't say enough about our late probation chief, Dale Allen, because he really proved how you can bring things in. You don't have to privatize these kinds of programs, and you can save money and you can have better results. He was in the process of actually bringing in social workers. So he had a partnership with the School of Social Work, UGA, Dean Chayed, and had these interns come in, but he wanted to bring in full, licensed social workers into this so that it wasn't just a pushing paper or giving somebody a referral, but actually where they can get the help. And so I so appreciated it. But the lesson there is that it really depends on who's in charge. It depends on who's leading that particular department, whether certain policies are going to be accepted and adapted to have this kind of reform. Dale Allen, completely believed in that this was the way to help the people that were coming into contact with his office. And he believed in that people could be rehabilitated, that people deserve that second chance, that they were, as Brian Stevenson says, worth a lot more than just their last mistake. But if he wasn't there, if there was somebody else who had been the chief probation, we might not have that system, even if it was public. So I think it's really important for people to understand, some of these leadership positions are elected, like John Q as sheriff or myself as DA. Some of them are appointed, like Dale Allen was, as the probation chief. But it really does come down to who are our leaders? What do they stand for? What do they believe? What will they commit to? And that's the question that voters are being asked to take, right, on November 3rd. And so that's why it's so important to have these kind of conversations, to put out the word about just what we each believe in, what we will do, what is happening currently, and what needs to change for our community. So thank you, Zach, for bringing that up, because I thought Dale Allen was just fabulous in what he did. So
yeah, and I would like to just chime in on that too, because even right now, I'm looking at different things that's going on online, and like my opponent is trying to attack me for being radical and all this other kind of stuff. And, I've worked with Dale Allen. I've worked with many people to improve the justice system, and his saying was, he doesn't believe in, he doesn't think there's bad people, but people might make bad mistakes or something. Don't quote me 100%. So his ideology was like, okay, this is a person that made a mistake. How can we help to get them out of the system, instead of it continuously be a recycling thing, a recidivism thing, where you're continuously going in and out of the system? So he was also on the task team for the pre-arrest diversion program. And people need to understand, yes, it does matter who is in those leadership positions, like Deborah said. He was appointed, but he believed in restorative justice, not just punitive. even with our solicitor coming up with the pre-arrest diversion, is to prevent you from going into the system, because like Deborah broke it down, and I'm so appreciative that you did, is that even if you're arrested and you weren't convicted of that crime, there is still something out there that shows that you were arrested, and there's a paper trail that affects your livelihood. When you go for jobs, you can't see what they see. They see these things, you know? So it's very important that we select people that has compassion for others. This is a public servant position, and the people come first. And we need to seek ways to restore justice as opposed to continuously creating punitive punishment, and causing people, increasing taxpayers' dollars and, all of that type of stuff. So we have to seek ways that we can balance out the system. So like, Deborah, I champion you on for the work that you have been doing. And it's like, people can't recognize that we don't want the old system anymore. We want people that are willing to go in there and to try to fight for change for everyone, not just for one class of people or a certain group of people, but for everyone. And it would be beautiful to see a new DA with a mind of restorative justice, a compassion. Yes, if you commit a crime, if you commit a crime and you've been, proven that you're guilty of it, you deserve to serve some time. You can't go around just breaking laws and causing harm to people without there be any type of punishment. But we need people in positions that's looking at this a little bit differently, and that's willing to create a restorative solutions.
Could I chime in on this? We have about 3 million people in jail and in prison. We have another 4.5 million who are on parole and probation. All of them and their families are being harmed by the way in which people are being sucked into mass incarceration and its aftermath, or even its accompaniment in parole and probation services. If we reduced our incarceration levels to that of Canada, we would save about $64 billion, as well as tremendous human carnage of the people and the communities affected by being dragged into our criminal system. Now, obviously, there are solutions to reducing that mass incarceration that involve the changes many people have been talking about. For example, if we eliminated cash bail, that would free from jail 60% of the people who fill our jails nationally. If we got rid of court fees and fines, almost no one would have to be on probation, because probation serves primarily to get people to pay their fines, and they are kept in, they're sucked into, in Georgia, into this for-profit probation service that makes them more and more indebted and ends up throwing them back in jail like a debtor's prison when they can't pay up. Of course, because we don't provide people with mental health care, which we should if we had Medicare for all. A third of the people in jail and prison are people who are there only because they haven't gotten mental health treatment. Think of all the people who are there because we have not decriminalized personal use of drugs of any sort, not just marijuana, but heroin, amphetamines, anything, right? Think of all the people who would not be sucked into the criminal justice system. Think of all the people who could be released from prison. But I think a huge issue that one has to keep in mind, which I think is the key to stopping recidivism and closing the door on mass incarceration, is to recognize a true right to work and have a federal job program so that everyone coming out of prison will have the same rights of everyone else. There will be a job awaiting them at a fair wage. And that means also affordable housing awaiting them and healthcare awaiting them. So they're not going to be among the 70+% of people who come out of prison and end up back in prison 5 years later. And then likewise, if everyone has a legal way of earning a living and they can afford to get the healthcare they need and the housing they need, we're going to shut the door on things like the school to prison pipeline. We're going to be in a completely different world with regard to the trauma that our whole justice system is inflicting on huge numbers of people who should not be drawn into it. And I think we have to think about the big picture. which I'm afraid can only be done at the national level. But the time is now. Under a pandemic, when we drag people into prison and into jails, we're making whatever they're there for, and usually it's connected to simply being poor. We're making that a death sentence for them as well as their communities, and that's a crime against humanity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we've done a pretty thorough job of going over the issues that we have in our criminal justice system, and you all have made a thorough analysis of what could be changed and what that would look like. I just wanted to go around one last time, and you guys can kind of make some closing remarks or statements if you want to, or you can just self-promote, or both. And I know, Mokah, you mentioned kind of needing to dash. So would you like to go first for closing out?
Yeah, so make sure you guys spend some time, check out my platform, Mokah for Georgia, www.mokahforgeorgia.com. When it comes to criminal justice reform issues, I'm advocating to end cash bail, addressing police brutality, raise the age from 17 to 18. When it comes to convictions, I do not believe someone that's 17-year-old should spend 20, 30 years in jail without having the opportunity to restore their lives. Repeal mandatory minimums, legalize marijuana, and stop prison labor. So those are the things that I will fight for when I take seat in 2021. Make sure you check out my website again, Mokah for Georgia. We're seeking volunteers. We need as much help as we can. Make a donation to my campaign. And thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Mokah. Let's see. Zach, you want to go?
Once again, yeah, my name is Zachary Perry. Once again, I'm happy as always to be a part of this, and I really appreciate Athens for everyone hosting this, and for all of you wonderful people for joining me on this as well. You can find my website at perryforgeorgia.com. Please go there and check out the issues. My Facebook page, I'll add that in here. My Twitter is Zachary Perry 12. If you have any questions about my platform or anything that I mentioned or anything that anyone mentions, I love talking to people about this stuff. It's one of my biggest disappointments about COVID is that I can't go knock door to door and bother people about politics. So please reach out, ask questions, get engaged, and support these fantastic candidates that I'm talking with, because Georgia is at the cusp of significant change, and we need to make sure that that changes in the right direction.
Deborah?
Okay, well, I would also like to thank Athens for everyone. I enjoy coming to these conversations. It gives me an opportunity to hear from my own, friends who are other candidates, and also get ideas about, things that I'm thinking about these last 2 weeks, obviously, or these last 2 sessions, obviously are very dear to my heart because of the role that I seek and going for district attorneys. So my name is Deborah Gonzalez. Again, I'm running for district attorney of the Western Judicial Circuit, which includes all of Athens and all of Oconee. So everybody can vote for me this time. You don't have to worry if you're in 117, 118, 119, it doesn't matter. You can vote for me. Is that I put on the Facebook a link to the Georgia Budget and Policies Initiative sort of summary about the budget, the 2020 and the 2021 budget. It's a little budget primary that deals only with those parts of the budget that deal with the criminal justice. So if you wanted to take a look at some of the numbers that were going out there, I wanted you to have that link. I also put out the link of my own website, deborah4da.com. You can take a look at some of my other platform points. And I am on Twitter and Facebook at DG, the number 4DA, DG, the number 4DA. Love to be in touch with you. Follow me We are also in need of volunteers. We do phone banking, and we've been almost done with all of the postcards. Imagine that. You guys have been phenomenal. But we do have phone banking every Sunday. We do lit drops if you want to get some exercise while the weather is cooling off, being beautiful, socially distanced, and in mask. You can definitely join us at the office. We post everything on Facebook, so you'll be able to see that. And every Thursday morning from 8 to 9 is Coffee with Deborah, Zoom and live through Facebook. So if you want to join the conversation, you can join us on Zoom. And if you just want to listen in and sort of put in those comments on Facebook, you can do that. It's never planned. We never know who's going to show up or what we're going to talk about, but it's a lot of fun. So I hope you'll join us. That's Thursday from 8 to 9. And thank you so much. And I hope to earn your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, Deborah. Richard, you want to go? And then we'll do John Q the very last.
We have to realize that all the problems that are plaguing our justice system are connected to more encompassing problems where we have failed to really recognize and enforce the fundamental social rights that we need to have recognized and enforced if we're going to be able to be free at home, in society, and be able to exercise our freedoms in our democratic self-governance. I try to address all these issues in this campaign that I'm running for US Senate. I invite all of you who are listening to take a look at what I'm standing for on my campaign website, winfieldforsenate.com, to listen to my podcast, America Unchained, where I'm addressing many of these things in greater detail than I have a chance here to discuss. I've also laid out arguments about them and solutions in a book called Democracy Unchained, which is readily available. And in these coming months to come, I obviously need volunteers, I need donations, I need you to spread the word because this is no time for political cowardice. We are moving towards a cliff, and if we don't push for the real solutions, we're going to go over. And we are going to suffer huge damage as a nation and as an entire planet if we do not wake up to the crisis we're facing and break the mold. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but not least is John Q. Williams.
And thanks again for this opportunity, for having me here these last couple of sessions. I want to, of course, put a positive spin on some things, but start off, yes, I'm John Q. Williams. I'm running for sheriff here in Clark County. And when I'm elected, I will be a sheriff for the people, because throughout my career, throughout my life, I have been just that, for the people. And that's what a sheriff should be. You have to be accountable to the very people that put you in office. So you're going to see me around, you're going to hear me around, you're going to be able to reach out to me. The one thing that I do want to say is my opponent has recently been saying a lot of things about me as far as my experience and whatnot. And even in one of his posts, he put that I was just mostly a dispatcher. And that's very offensive to me, and it's offensive to all the dispatchers I know. Dispatchers are law enforcement. They are first responders. They're recognized mostly nationally as such now. And they are truly the backbone of some of the best law enforcement organizations throughout the country and world even. And it's a critical job. A lot of people can't do it. I didn't stop doing it because I couldn't do it. I stopped doing it because I wanted to do more. I wanted to have that contact with people. And to disrespect such a noble part of a critical profession is just classless. And I just wanted to say that, because once a dispatcher, always a dispatcher. So remember that about me. I'm always going to fight for everybody, all people. I'm not going to say you're just this or you're just that. To learn more, we've got some new videos that came out. I've got a radio ad running on WXAG, local at WXAG. And if you want to see any of my other videos to learn more, www.johnqforsheriff.com. You can always also do forathens.com, John Q for Athens. Both of them work. We got both sites up. And Facebook. Please reach out there. We're doing phone banking. We're writing a lot of postcards. Yes, we need donations. We need volunteers. We're not going to rest on our laurels. We beat the 20-year incumbent, and we're pushing forward November 3rd. Please vote for John Q. Williams for sheriff of Clark County.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much, everybody who tuned in to watch, people who might watch in the future, since this will be up on our YouTube channel very soon. And thank you to all the candidates for their very thorough and thoughtful remarks on such a complex issue as criminal justice reform. You all give me a lot of hope and faith that these things can and will change. And I guess we'll all see each other again pretty soon. We'll be doing this again, not next Friday, but the Friday after, and we will be getting ever so close to the critical hour.
Yeah, we're so close to the finish line. Thank you, Erin, for having us.
Thanks, y'all.